Preparing the live stream.
I really wanted to have some electronics things, a table. It said, oh no, please make a PowerPoint.
Yeah, well, I like Mitch is not the. This is getting recorded live on YouTube. Mitch is not the most live stream technical savvy guy on the planet.
That's okay. Yeah.
I love that picture. So yeah, so being able to do that wouldn't have been ridiculous. We have a second camera we could have for you.
Okay. Oh yeah, we're gonna make it work.
Yeah. Saying future reference. And
This is the first time we've done a
hybrid.
hybrid type thing.
Yeah, it's a little harder.
Last year's worked fine. This one, I'm not a big fan of doing a handfest hybrid. But if it wasn't for the hybrid, we would not have broken even.
Well, anyway, this is all recorded, so yeah. But you know, the hybrid is harder because you're adapting for. You've got to present for live and present for virtual. And all virtual is really quite a bit easier. But I prefer. I mean, all live would be awesome too, but that's never going to happen again.
Built to detect my speaker.
You haven't been detected, Jeff? You're the speaker.
We were doing better earlier.
Well, they got 3 minutes.
I can mute. All right, folks, slight bit of technical difficulty here. Jeff's got to get his computer squared away. Was working an hour ago. We did a test run, but stand by just a second. Apologize for the little delay.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you have, all your stuff is on your laptop, right?
Yes, yeah, the presentation is right here, and I brought it on a thumb drive as well, but, that's microphone and speaker both.
Oh,
This is the way I've done it all the time.
okay. So again, sorry for the delay. We've got a little bit of a technical difficulty here at the speaker's computer.
Speaker's computer and the computer speaker.
Yeah.
Months.
Yeah. Things are live. Things get messy. What is this thing? 530. Okay. Now. Doesn't have an SSD in it, I take it.
Yes, it does. Windows 7 does not boot as fast as Windows 10.
Right. Well, hopefully it recognizes your audio this time. Hopefully that solves it. Yeah, your lid suspends it and everything. That's right. Okay. Stand by. We are pretty close. Cross your fingers anyway. Welcome to HamCon in Colchester, Vermont this morning. It's cold, although sunny. Sorry for folks that might have wanted to travel here today. It didn't yesterday because of the extra snow we got. Sorry not to pay attention to folks in the room so much. It's funny with the live stuff going on. I know they can hear me too. Jeff will be up in just a second. Recognize your mic.
Whatever. Yeah.
All right. All right. So I got that. Video. Didn't complain about your audio. It is.
Okay. I like
Live
it.
stream, got it. All right. So I think we are ready to go. This is Jeff Bonn. I mean, he's got a little intro for himself, so I'm not going to go overboard. The discussion today is radios and I was going to say animation, but that's silly. Radios and aviation. We'll let it to you. I will mute my mic. So.
Yeah, radios with aviation. I hope you're having a good HamCon so far. Okay. Hello. Yes. Okay, I've got a presentation to bring up here in a moment.
You're going to be talking to these guys too.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Yes. Here comes a PowerPoint that's going to have some computers and aviation kind of things. It's under H for HamCon. G. Yes, I will. Okay. Here we go. So I'm going to say share screen. And I'm going to share HamCon 22, like so. And I'm going to say I'd like a slideshow, starting from first slide. Okay, I think there's hope here.
All right, well, verify. You guys online, do you see Jeff's PowerPoint presentation? Like, give me a raised hand or unmute. Good, got it.
Okay, good. All right, yeah. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your interest Yeah, this is about radios and aviation. I'm Jeff Bonn, N1YD, and I've been an amateur radio, licensed for amateur radio since 2002. I learned to fly in 2014, and I've worked at IBM for quite a long time, then at Global Foundries. And I'm particularly interested in electronics more than just talking on the radio, but there are a lot of radio related things regarding aviation that you may be interested in and like to hear about or see or whatever. I do not own the N1YD airplane. This is someone else's, but I saw the picture one day and said, okay, this is kind of cute. Before I get too much further, what is the little propeller on the side of the plane? I got to the Rhinebeck Aerodrome last summer. I said, what in the world is that thing? I had to find a museum docent saying, okay, what have we got here? What do you think it is?
Welcome to put it in the chat, folks, if you want.
Yeah. And I got an answer. It's a generator. If it's an airplane, you don't really put the generator on the fan belt because, airplanes don't have fan belts. So instead, this thing sits out in the breeze, and depending on how fast you're flying, you have a varying amount of electricity available, and it would run the electronics of the day, this is an early airmail airplane. You know what? Only part of this screen is showing. Okay, I think I know what to do. I'm going to do that and then say I want slideshow. And I bet you that's what it needs. Yeah, I'm going to say, one moment, this is going to look better for all.
F5 will do a slideshow.
Oh, okay. Let me hit F5, please. Yes, I like that. Okay. Moving ahead. Okay. Okay, so radios and aviation go together. I happen to live downwind of the balloon festival that used to be held at the Essex Junction Fairgrounds, and the balloons were right over my home. I live in that condominium, and radios and aviation don't just go together. Sometimes they actually touch, as in the tip of the antenna is poking into the balloon. So there are always these pilots who push the envelope, and I can't necessarily recommend it, but there they are. When you put up a tower, make sure to make it strong enough to withstand airplanes floating by and stuff like that, balloons and etc. Okay, so now let's talk about some actual radios. It turns out when you get into an airplane and you get on the air, a lot of what they do is similar to what we have in amateur radio. You have to listen before you transmit. You always call with your ID, or actually with who you were calling, then your own ID. So, Burlington Approach, November 33907 Juliet. That's the way of getting things done in the proper way. And there are some standard ways to communicate. There are certain things you would say and all of that. So you state your intentions, your request, you be brief about it. And generally, aircraft radios work quite well. The controllers and the other aircraft seem to be able to hear you nicely. The range is quite good. And most of the time, you're at a high enough altitude that, it's line of sight, that there isn't a whole lot of difficulty getting through. I think the aircraft radios are 50 to 100 watts. I don't know the exact amount, but I remember seeing something like that at once. And even though you don't see it on the aviation charts, it turns out that air traffic control has their own repeaters. You can be on some long distance flight. I was flying to the far side of the far end of Pennsylvania, and over the Adirondack Mountains, they said, contact Boston Center. And I'm like, holy cow, I am nowhere near Boston. What in the world are they getting at? And it turns out there is some kind of repeater that I go to the frequency they ask for. I key up, say Boston Center, 3307 Juliet, and they say, yeah, hi there, how you doing? And it's because there are repeaters that will talk to you easily, even though you would think it wasn't going to happen. If you're using a radio in a plane, though, you have some potential complications. For one thing, the radios in planes pretty much don't have memories. You think you could just dial Burlington, Plattsburgh, Boston, JFK, and it's not like that. People tend to make a list on their tablet computer or their tablet piece of paper and write down frequencies before they go. Also, you have two radios and two headsets. There are two press-to-talk buttons, one on either yoke, and several volume controls. There'd be one for COM 1, one for COM 2, one on your headset. There are mixer devices that let you listen to two radios at once, and so there are ways to go wrong, and you can sometimes think that you're transmitting and not, so you have to, do things right, and if you don't, then you're not really going to succeed at what you're trying to get across on. Also, on almost every airplane that's flying into controlled airspace, you have to have a transponder, and it works with the airport's air traffic control radar. At the Burlington Airport, at major airports, there's actually a rotating antenna that sweeps the area, and it can see any flying object, including flocks of birds and stuff like that, but it doesn't really have a good way to determine altitude. So every plane has some kind of transponder. There's a transponder code. You dial up 000 to 7777, and air traffic control can say, squawk a certain number, set a certain number for identification, and that puts your blip on the radar screen with, something that they know about. And there's a default for people who are flying around visual flight rules. If you're out of the controlled area, you just set it to 1200, which is like the default for everybody. And the way the transponder works is that in the aircraft, the transponder detects the radar signal from the airport, and it sends a return that's sending back the squawk code and the altitude. So that built right into the altimeter of the airplane is some encoding kind of thing, and it's, altitude encoding, as they call it, and air traffic control kind of knows where you are and your altitude. And now and then there are unidentified radar returns, and air traffic control will say, please turn or whatever, and they'll say it's probably a flock of birds. A lot of what you do might be on an uncontrolled airport, an airport without a control tower. has what's known as a common traffic advisory frequency, a CTAF, and the pilots work it out among themselves. You like before takeoff, you key up the microphone. Franklin County traffic. Cessna 33907 Juliet is at Alpha for takeoff on runway 1, departing to the west, Franklin County. You say the airport name twice, and then other aircraft in the area know that somebody's about to get on the runway, etc., and you kind of know what's happening. And before you would even say that, you'd listen, because other people may be coming in, may be leaving. Somebody might be doing touch and goes and flying over and over again in a circle, and you got to keep track of where they are and stuff like that. The strangest airport that you're ever going to find is Plattsburgh, because it has airliners flying in, sharing the airport with, general aviation people in Cessnas and stuff, with no control tower. So you talk to the big boys just like you talk to the, fellow Cessna people. And also, late at night, the control tower is not staffed 24 hours a day. So at Burlington, for example, the control tower closes late at night. And at that time, Burlington is then an uncontrolled airport. You don't use the approach and tower frequencies. You just turn to the CTAF frequency and work it out with the other pilots who might be in the area. A controlled airport has a control tower, and they have a very precisely defined airspace. You can see circles on the aviation chart of here's the area that controller, owns, that belongs to that airport. And before entering the airspace, you have to communicate with them. The controlled airspace does not go all the way to heaven. It turns out it goes up to a certain altitude, I think 4,000 feet or something like that, depending on what it is. And you can fly high above an airport without really dealing with them. But if you're in their area, you've got to talk to them. And the first thing you would just say is something like, Burlington approach, your airplane, November 33907 Juliet. And air traffic control provides the traffic separation to keep you safe from everybody else. When you communicate, you want to do it properly. If they ask, what are your intentions? It means, what would you like to do right now? Like you want to land, or you want to transit the airport, or whatever. And don't say, my intentions. Well, I'd like to get my commercial pilot's license, instrument rating. And so, funny things happen from time to time on the radio. An aircraft radio has a fixed squelch level. We don't have that one extra knob that gives you a potential for trouble. The squelch level is set by some technician when they do the annual inspection. They check it and make sure it's good. You can reach anybody you want easily if you have an adequate altitude. If you're flying at 1,500 feet, you may not get as many out as far as you would think. When you communicate, you use the phonetic alphabet. Usually, time is stated in UTC, and numbers are usually stated, instead of saying 10, you say 10, things like that. We don't usually use HF radios. If you're crossing an ocean, I have seen an airplane that was about to do an ocean crossing, and to make it work, they install an HF radio just for that trip. And there will be a long wire stretching from the cockpit to the top of the rudder, the top of the, or what would you call it, horizontal stabilizer, giving it enough length that, you could use an HF radio. But normally, around here inside the United States, HF is not part of what we do. If you were going to cross an ocean, you might also put in extra fuel tanks, life vests, maybe whatever. If you're going to cross the Great Lakes, for example, I was told you must have life vests on board, things like that. Now, if you would like to listen to air traffic control, it turns out there's a website, liveatc.net. You type in any airport ID, any type of communication you want to listen to. You can listen to tower or ground or approach or the automated weather recording, and it'll all show up right there without even getting out of your comfortable chair. You could probably get it on your phone. But if you were actually going to listen to it on the radio with the radio, the weather report, the automatic, what ATIS, I forget exactly what it stands for, but it's the weather information is on 117.5, approach and departure is 121.1, tower is 118.3, ground is 126.3, and there's a navigation radio on 117.5. You could probably hear any of these, even though they're transmitting on AM, you can hear it with an FM handheld radio, as long as it tunes to that frequency.
Automatic terminal information system.
What they call ATIS, ASOS, or AWOS is automated weather information. It's a brief message about the wind, the sky conditions, the temperature, barometric pressure, and anything special going on at the airport. If it's a towered airport, they include a code word saying, when you contact approach, advise that you have information Tango or you have information Alpha. And every hour or so, whenever the weather changes, they give you a new letter. So if it's information Tango this morning, it'll be information uniform, later on. And when you first contact, you say, okay, Burlington ground, November 33907 Juliet with Tango. So before you leave your parking space and taxi out to a runway and stuff, and you're talking to ground, you make sure you're telling them that you have the weather and that you have the current weather because you know that it's Tango. You can also, if you like, dial up that phone number and you can hear the Burlington ATIS on your telephone. And if you can hear the Plattsburgh ATIS, if you want to call area code 518. So these are things you get to participate in a little bit if you have your head in the clouds and longing to participate and didn't really get out into an airplane yet. The way these automated reports come from is the airport has a machine called a celiometer that looks at the sky and identifies the clouds, and it seems to work day or night. And it reports that the clouds are overcast, broken, scattered, few, or sky is clear, and it will tell you the height of the clouds. And from this, you can tell whether you can go flying or not, whether you can fly VFR or whether you have to be flying on instruments under, what are called instrument meteorological conditions. And, you're going to want to know that. And you can know that before you even get to the airport as well, because, it's no point flying to an airport that's socked in with, unusable conditions. And part of the automated weather report is barometric pressure, because there's a little knob on your altimeter that you get to say, if the barometric pressure is 29.92, you go and wiggle with that 29.92 thing. And from that, your altitude is going to match everybody else's as the weather conditions change. And as you fly along across the country, you'll hear various pressures, and you'll dial your altimeter up and down to match whatever it is. Okay, and then if air traffic control is asking if you have hotel, they mean, do you have information hotel? Do you have weather information hotel? And supposedly, somewhere in the history of aviation, somebody said, no, we don't have a hotel yet. We're going to stay at my sister-in-law's. Okay. If you want to get a really cool feeling as a pilot, there's something called pilot-controlled lighting. As you're flying to some of the smaller airports that don't have a control tower, you get to turn on the lights all by yourself. You click the button on the yoke. I think is it 5 times or is it 10 times? I don't remember the exact
5.
number. Only 5? Okay, thank you. So we have a pilot in our audience. And yeah, you click 5 times. There's a certain number of times that'll make it brighter or dimmer as well. And all it is you use the same frequency that you're talking to other pilots on, and the system will automatically turn on the lights, and they remain lit for 15 minutes or some reasonable period of time. There's nothing you can send to turn the lights off, because that would be counterproductive and stupid and harmful. And that's one of the great feelings in aviation, is you get to turn on the lights. The other great feeling is if you fly to Burlington, there are people who will come out and help you park, and they'll come out with the 2 colored wands, and they'll wave at you for this and this, or turn left, or turn here to stop. And it's like, oh boy, they're treating me just like I'm flying in on a 747. Very satisfying. Okay. Navigation radios. Until we had GPS, the key to getting around and finding your way were what they called VOR radios or NDB radios. VOR in particular was a key thing. Today, they're not as critical, but they're still out there. And a VOR station is set up to send out a signal that varies by direction. If you're north of it, your receiver sees it in one way. If you're south or east or west of it, you see something else. And the receiver in your plane can tell the direction to the nav aid. And in some stations, there's also a way that the distance to the thing is found. Yeah, the DME, a distance measuring equipment that will let you know not only the direction to that station, but the distance to it. The other key kind of navigation is called a non-directional beacon, that it's pretty much just an AM transmitter, but that one is simply a dial on your plane that points towards the station. And you can even use that NDB to find WVMT or any commercial AM radio station, although you should navigate only with official, AM, official nav aids, not commercial. stuff. I guess on a really long trip, if you're a real redneck, you can tune your NDB to listen to AM radio as you go.
Got to
Okay.
know where the transmitter is.
Okay, these are some images of VORs. The VOR station has a big flat ground plane kind of thing underneath it, or I guess whatever it is. The head of the radio has this vertical line that tells you how far you are from that radial of the VOR. So if you are 23 degrees magnetically from the VOR, and this line's in the center, then you're at 23 degrees. If that line is off one way or another, you can tell how far you are from the 23-degree radial. And if you're not successfully receiving, this little thing that says nav will turn into a red flag, and you'll know that you're not really tuned to the VOR station, or you're not as close to the station as you think you might be. And that's your way of, knowing what's up before things go bad for you. This is a little screenshot actually from Flight Simulator, but the key idea, you tune your radios to the frequencies of the VORs you want to use. You might typically have two of them that you can kind of triangulate. And if you get an intersection, you may feel good, when a VOR crosses or something like that, you get to watch what's going on. It helps you know what you're doing. If you don't have GPS, one of the best ways to navigate is to fly VOR to VOR. And their range is 50 miles or more, so you can do it. And even if it's out of range, you kind of know what direction it's in, and you can give it some Kentucky windage and dead reckoning, as they would call it. And if you can get within 50 miles of the next station, you'll really know what's up. The way you would use a VOR, tune to its frequency, and you can actually listen to it. So you turn on its volume a minute to identify, as they call it, and it identifies in Morse code. And on the aviation chart, in case you're not up on your Morse code, you will hear something like BTV. You'll hear dash ... for B, and dash for T, and dash ... for V, whatever it is. No, ... dash for V. Okay, and then you dial the OBS, I think it's called. You dial the knob on the VOR for what kind of radial you want and stuff like that. So the VORs are not totally simple, but they can do some good things for you. If the plane is equipped with what is called DME, it will give you distance to the station. And it works by the airplane answers something that is sent out from the VOR. And the time to get the reply, since radio waves move at the speed of light or somewhere close to it, computes the distance, and it's the range to the station. So it might say 50 nautical miles, you're approaching at 100 knots, and we'll be there in 30 minutes. There's another kind of nav aid that people kind of hate, and I don't really know why. The plane I rented, no plane I've ever rented ever had one, but non-directional beacon is just a pointer on your instrument panel that's pointing to the radio. And your plane has two receiving antennas, and from the two antennas, it can sense which direction the station is located relative to you. And as your plane turns, the indicator on the instrument panel would change as well. And they call that the RMI on your panel. And it looks something like that. And I think heading is a way of dialing that outside compass rose, and the yellow needle is pointing to your station. Or if you're out of range, you don't know it. This one doesn't give you any warning, that you're not receiving something. Planes, I guess just about every airplane, as far as I know, has some kind of emergency locating transmitter. I believe they're on 406 megahertz. And they're set up that they will automatically activate if the radio is shocked hard enough. So if you bump it or something, now and then rescue crews have gone knocking on someone's door because they're hearing an ELT signal and somebody had a radio in the garage and they plopped down their big box of stuff and it activated, and they'll come trying to save you and look in your garage or wherever your plane goes down or whatever. And I think that this button on the side is to say that you can activate it yourself on the control panel with the button if you need to test it or if you're in trouble.
A couple dozen to 2020. And what you can see is actually there are more log entries now than ever before, which you could interpret as, whoa, things alive and well. But what's to complain about?
Okay,
we're growing at a really healthy clip.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna keep up one. Okay. The way cell phones work. Oh, okay. You don't hear the same thing I'm hearing in here, but okay. Yeah. People on Zoom are hearing another talk as well somehow. But okay. Okay. For cell phones, things don't work quite like you would imagine. It turns out that there is a rule against using your cell phone even in a small plane. It's not an FAA rule. It's for the FCC, because a phone at a high altitude is seeing many towers at once, and that can be kind of hard on the cell phone system. But if you're a private pilot and you have your smartphone, they like to leave it on because with broadband internet, you can get weather information as you fly. And it's so wonderful and good that I think a lot of pilots do that. The other thing you ought to know about is that I never had a suitable cell phone, so I've not done that myself, but the information can be displayed, weather information can be displayed on your chart basically through your phone. And people don't really use airplane mode in their airplanes. Now, yeah. Yeah, you're looking at me like that's not a good thing to do.
It was a hi-hat, right? You said that you don't use airplane mode in an airplane. That's
That's the truth. Yes. There are people who get Bluetooth. Oh, okay. I didn't have a note about it, but if you have Bluetooth on your aviation headset, you could actually make a phone call and hear people. If you just pull out your plain old cell phone of this sort of thing and try to talk, the plane is too noisy and it's not going to work very well. Okay, GPS revolutionized airplane navigation. You just know where you are. And not only do you know where you are, your airplane is displayed on a moving map of an aviation chart. And it turns out to navigate by GPS, you don't need an FAA certified instrument. You can just get any old tablet computer or smartphone. And you don't even need to buy a very special app this one, at least for Android, is open source. Yeah, if we,
Even your, this will work too.
oh, okay,
You can see it.
yeah. Let's see now, yeah. And you can pinch and you can stretch and you can pan around, and that little red mark in the middle is your position. And it's a beautiful thing. It really is. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, I got it. So if you have Android, Avare, open source app, AVARE, spell it that way, and you'll have your you'll get what I've got right here, and that is enough to navigate your airplane around. The actual aviation charts are made by the FAA. They're available free to download. Any app, downloads them. The whole idea of it is that you can be flying somewhere. You set up, this is where I want to go on the app, and you see the aviation chart. You see the weather. That green might be more of a concern down here on the left, or whatever. And this particular screenshot doesn't show it, but your plane's position is shown as well. You can, if you're flying in instrument conditions, you can have this instrument approach plate, and your airplane's position is shown on the approach plate. There are some other specialized kind of things if you're flying under instrument conditions to help you find the runway. GPS isn't quite precise enough for that, so we have some extra nav aids that tells you if you're left or right of the runway, and the one called glide slope to tell you if you're high or low. And there are 3 specialized transmitters that shoot straight up in a very narrow pattern called the inner, middle, or outer marker. And as you fly over them, you get a beeping sound. And if you hear beep, beep, that's the outer marker. And when you get to the inner marker, you hear beep, 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 beep. And that tells you where you are.
That's what they said.
Doppler radar is a wonderful thing. We kind of know what the weather is. You can view it before takeoff. You can see it in flight. You really have to understand, though, that the weather information can be 15 minutes old. You can't tactically use it to say, oh, I'm going to go around this thunderstorm because, I think I know its exact position.
Bigger and higher is more better and more louder. So you don't need a big antenna. I first won my category in
the airplanes.
We got crosstalk.
Constantly sending. I'm making a presentation. Yes. Someone else, please go on mute. Ask people to mute, please. Okay. Yeah. ADSB, most planes are transmitting their altitude, position, identification, and speed in an encoded way. And the plane is also listening for it, so that if another aircraft is nearby, you're going to see it on your display. The same GPS screen is going to show collision warnings. It's sort of like having radar in every plane. If you want to see it yourself, you can get a radio this big. They were actually made for European TV, but there's a program called ADSB Scope. 1090 megahertz means little radio waves. You'll need a little antenna. Okay, yes. So that's all you need for a radio. And to see ADSB, that's about all you need for the antenna. And what you will get from that is something like this, where you can see the aircraft as you go. Okay, this isn't for the pilots, but if you're sitting at home and you want to see planes go by, you'll learn certain things and stuff. And you can see planes up to 40 or 50 miles away because they're at a good altitude and it's line of sight. Okay, that's all I've got to present. So I'd like to take any questions if you're interested.
We'll go in-house first for questions, and then if you have a question online, just reactions down the bottom and raise your hand, and I'll get to you. Anybody in here like to ask a question?
Yeah. Oh yeah, give him. Okay, yeah, we'll give you the microphone so they
Are
can do
the
it.
older planes, like older Cessnas and such, required to update with the modern radios and devices? Or do they fly as they were built?
Oh, okay. There are some requirements to stay up to date. One of those is that planes that fly in controlled airspace now have to have the ADS-B, and they think they have to have, depending on the airspace, but for most airspace, they have to have what's called the encoding altimeter, that air traffic control would know your altitude. So those two are absolutely required. And I think some of the very old radios did not have the same channel spacing, that you couldn't get the precise frequencies. And so, yeah, there have been some updates over the years.
Anybody else have a question? Sure.
For the calls, often I've heard like, the registration number as your call, but also like Bonanza or Cessna. Is that part of the actual call, or is that just sort of?
Okay. Well, yes. When you first talk to air traffic control, you give it your full thing, Cessna 339 Juliet. It's the N number on the back of your plane. But then when they reply to you, when they start calling you 97 Juliet, just the last 3 characters, that's what you can use instead. So you can identify yourself as 97 Juliet once you know each other. But because, yeah, it is a kind of a long, cumbersome thing to say.
Anybody else? Sure. And on that point, though, fun fact, right? We have amateur radio call signs, KK1L, N1,
Yeah.
what's the
N1YD, yeah.
Right? And on the airplanes, they have that N1YD plane. That's a US. I mean, the call sign prefix is the same for aviation. I was on taking a bus around the tarmac at Beijing airport, and there were these military planes, and they had SU on them. I'm like, holy crap, what's an Egyptian plane doing here?
Okay, yeah.
Fun fact again.
The question is, do you or other hams who are licensed pilots operate ham radio in the air?
Oh, okay. Yes. I have never operated ham radio in the air, but Paul, AA1SU, told me that he took a commercial flight once, and the law is you cannot use an amateur radio on a plane without the pilot's permission. So he asked the pilot's permission, and they said, yeah, go ahead. And he reached a whole lot of people with an HT in an airliner. Yeah, you're inside a metal plane, but I imagine it could do some good things anyway.
All right. Anybody else? Question online? Anybody with a question online? All right.
Yeah.
Twice, 3 times. All right.
Okay.
Jeff,
Yeah. Hey,
awesome.
thank you all for your interest. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Well
Jeff.
prepared. Nice stuff. Jeff Bonn. All right, so we're prepping for our next presentation in this room, setting up your HF station. Tony Luskra. I mean, I'm butchering your name. You can pronounce it right when you come on, but that'll be in 10 minutes.
Anthony Luskery.
How much does it cost to get a pilot's license?
Let's see. You believe the plane. You pay for the plane, the fuel, and the instructor.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you